In today's Elden Ring video, we'll take a look at 6 more powerful bleed weapons that will likely surprise you. These are hidden gems that have unique functionalities or just fit a wide selection of builds, so much so that you're likely going to want to give them a chance, so let's begin. Coming up to number 6, a favorite of mine that carried me very late into the game was the Inquisitor Granddale, which comes with both innate blood loss as well as the possibility to set enemies on fire, among many other advantages. You of course have to get abducted by the abductor beneath the academy and get your way all the way beneath the volcano manor, and instead of making your way towards the Aglay temple, you're going to want to actually take it to the left and just descend a lot more in the volcano about 2 times until you reach this area with a site of grace. From this point on, simply head further using these pillars until this room collapses and you're gonna be close to one of these duo abductor boss fights that if you defeat, you're also going to get that really awesome weapon. Now don't get fooled by the fact that this looks like a glorified coat hanger with some marshmallows at the top. This is still a very strong weapon. As I've said, it comes with innate blood loss build-up by default and also deals extra fire damage on top. In fact, at maximum upgrades, it gets a B scaling into faith, so totally worth it for a build that uses a lot of those. But it also comes with another major advantage, which is its weapon art. When you use it, you basically get to charge forth with the spear, dealing damage, interrupting foes, and eventually even fully throw them on their backs, which makes up for some excellent damage and also stacking up those bleeds. It's actually so strong that you can use it to literally dodge incoming attacks, especially against pesky mages. Your character will be on a lower stance, so most of the attacks aimed towards your middle upper body are not going to hit and you're gonna be able to dodge that. But yeah, also the 2 bleeds and the fire damage are very useful as it is. Coming up to number 5, the next one is going to be the Fischl Greatsword. You can actually get this during the festival over at the Red Maid's castle, both before and after defeating Radahn, as long as you just trigger that event. So in this case, you will want to use this teleporter outside of the castle, which will bring you close to the courtyard. Simply head over to the right here inside this building, head up the ladder at the top, and on this rooftop, you'll want to defeat this pumpkin enemy and then just retrieve the Greatsword from the nearby wall right here upon one of these corpses. Surprisingly enough, you can go with a wide selection of builds with this weapon. Obviously, you still have the option to go full dexterity, apply a bleed affinity, and create a ton of build up towards that. Or if you want to like switch things around and maybe play with something like a dexterity/intelligence hybrid, you can also apply a frostbite build up on top and have both of these status effects on the same weapon. In this case, I was playing with the giant hunt, but you can also apply a gravitas with the frostbite affinity, and it's still an amazing option to apply both of these effects at the same time. As a matter of fact, the giant hunt is one of my favorite abilities with this build. The weapon is already pretty long, it also deals nice damage, and since you throw most enemies on the ground, you can quickly follow up with a series of attacks that eventually will create either frostbite or blood loss on the enemy if it somehow still survives. If you want to go with more magic kind of routes, you totally have the option to use that gravitas or other similar effects for additional damage, and it's totally going to increase the AR even more on it if you play with a hybrid build like this. Coming up to number 4, the next one that comes in at quite a big surprise is the Spiked Club. It might look innocent, maybe even dull, no pun intended, but it's something you can find early and it can be very strong. The best way to farm this is at the Volcano Cave right here north of Volcano Manor. There's gonna be a bunch of these humanoid enemies that equip that weapon both outside and inside of the cave, so you can farm them quickly and eventually you should see at least one of these dropping. Now, what makes this weapon truly incredible is the fact that it gets an A scaling into Arcane if you apply an Occult Affinity on it. So this is not just going to increase its physical damage, but it's also going to increase that blood loss buildup, so you kinda get everything you need from an amazing weapon. In this case, I prefer coupling it with Wild Strikes. This is an amazing Asho Ward that's barely interruptible. There's not many many attacks in the game that can do that. You can continuously use it with very little consumption in terms of FP and stamina, and you're gonna be able to just proc those bleeds to no end against any enemy or boss. I really enjoy it because it kind of turns you into this powerhouse as long as you don't like take too many big hits in the face, and the enemy is definitely going to drop dead way before it even reaches you, or well, before it can even take you down. In this case, if you're fighting against enemies that can resist some of that, I totally suggest dodging and looking for openings, since there's gonna be plenty enough time to cast at least a few of these swings and eventually fully destroy them. Now, coming up to number 3, we're gonna take a look at the longest katana in Elden Ring, the Nagakiba. You get this either before or during Yura's questline. If you did not start it yet, you can pretty much find him right here, very close to the starting zone, near the Murkwater Cave, and you can just go ahead and take them down there, and they're likely going to drop the sword. Otherwise, you're going to have to finish their questline up until you reach the mountaintops, and if you screwed something up and they didn't like drop it for you at the end of the quest line, you can always just get back at one of their like camps, and you're going to see the Nagakiba right there. Now this, as I've said, is one of the longest katanas in Elden Ring, almost twice the size of the regular Uchigatana, and at a full level 25 it's going to have a better scaling with dexterity than the Uchigatana has, so it's totally the better option. As I've said, you can play with this the normal way as you did with the regular Uchigatana and just use the unsheath, maybe with a bleed affinity if you want to, but you can totally use the piercing strike that it already has to deal a ton of damage. I especially like this skill on it. You can of course also find the Ash of War variant and apply it with a different affinity if you want to, but it's an amazing one to use from a very long range. Not only is the Nagakiba a very long weapon as it is, this Ash of War also has a very good range, and it's a perfect couple with that sword. Oh, and you also get to interrupt, maybe even fully stun enemies, so totally worth it, which is why I completely changed to this one once I get my hands on it at the start of the game instead of continuing with the Uchigatana. Coming up to number 2, the next one is going to be the vulgar militia halberd. Actually, another early option we can find right here nearby Bestial Sanctum. There's about 3 of these smaller enemies on the northeastern coastline of that peninsula that if you farm enough, you're eventually going to see one of these dropping. I definitely recommend going for 2 of them at the same time, because when you power stance them, they become truly amazing. So in this case, I was using it with a high dex build with bleed affinity, 1 seppuku and 1 bloodhound step on each of them, so it gave me both enough bloodlust build-up as well as additional means to dodge attacks. Especially against Melania, I tested this against her and it was totally a blast to use it. One of the major advantages compared to some of the other scimitar options is the fact that the jumping L1, if you power stance these, is going to have a much longer reach, since these are pretty long weapons as it is, and you kind of do a slash into the ground with both of them at the same time. So against Melania, this was totally amazing. Also gets to interrupt her quite a bit, but you can bring this against other enemies as well, and it's still going to perform very well. I'm not gonna say that this is the best of them all, but it's totally a viable option if you want something with a bit more range. And finally, to truly number 1, we have the Cross Naginata, an amazing option both in PvE and especially so in PvP. You do get this from the Gale Tunnel over in Kale. You have to make your way over at the bottom, and you're going to find it behind one of these tentacle monsters inside one of these caves to the right side. But basically, this is one of the best bleed weapons in all Elden Ring, and it's both amazing when using just one of them, or even more so when you're using 2 of them at the same time, especially if you combine it with a seppuku. Most of its attacks, with the exception of maybe the regular ones with the R1, are pokes, including the jumping ones, so you're constantly keeping enemies at a distance, reaching them from pretty far away, and providing a ton of bloodlust build-up at the same time. Power stancing this is just overall broken, to be honest. You get to do a series of pokes when you jump with 2 of them at the same time, which quickly adds up that bleed and also deals a ton of damage in itself. You can probably build this as a mage hybrid too, with something like a glintstone pebble Ash of War, and it's still going to be amazing for that additional bleed. So yeah, these weapons don't just fit these bleed builds, but also anything else that might want to also add bleed into their setup. Totally viable, totally amazing. Let me know down below which one of these was your favorite, or if there's any other weapons with innate bloodlust on them that I missed. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.